Hi guys, it's Anastasia and welcome back to my YouTube channel. As you can see from the title of this video, I'm going to be telling you about why I quit YouTube. Now, in order to understand why I quit, I think it's really helpful to understand what brought me here in the first place, what the promise of YouTube was to me. I think if you understand what my intention was and what I wanted to achieve, it becomes a lot easier to understand why I very quickly became disillusioned. The story begins with my first love. Now, my first love was writing. My first love was art of any kind now that I think about it. When I was young, I fell deeply in love with the fact that you can consume something, whether that be a book, whether that be a work of art, whether that be a song or a film, and have this deep connection to something. And beyond that, have a deep connection to someone. I fell deeply in love with the fact that someone, somewhere, at some point in time, crafted something, put their soul into something that years, decades, or even centuries down the line, you found and were able to connect to powerfully. The fact that you can connect with another human across space and time who might not even be alive anymore. But beyond the beauty of the fact that you could have this sort of connection across space and time with someone that may not even be alive anymore, what was poignant about that moment to me was the fact that it could deeply inspire you. There were a lot of times growing up and even going into college when I didn't feel comfortable or secure in my thoughts, but I stumbled upon the right quote at the right time, and it made me feel less alone. It made me feel more understood, and little by little it was ultimately what formed my self-concept and my self-identity. In this way, stumbling upon little bits and pieces of my thoughts and my soul in the works of others actually allowed me to believe in myself and to gradually over time formed the cornerstone of my self-confidence. Needless to say, I've always been one to admire the power of content to have a positive impact and to inspire people. This admiration for the power of content to impact and inspire people made me really want to dedicate my own life to trying to do the same. I noticed that in a lot of the works that I most deeply connected with, the point of connection would often come down to a very specific insight about life. And so in my desire to inspire and to connect, I've always set out to be very hyper aware of those moments of insight or epiphanies or sparks of inspiration as they happen in my own life so that I could then channel it into what I was creating. So in the past, I've channeled these little epiphanies or observations that inspired me into writing. In college, I also discovered my passion for design because design was yet another medium for communication and connection. So I would try to channel into some of my design projects. And then after I graduated college, I discovered another medium that really inspired me with its potential for allowing me to enable the sort of inspired connections that I so desired to enable. And that was YouTube. I don't know if I'm describing the moment of inspiration as well as I could be, but let me just try to make sure that we're all on the same page because everybody's experienced these moments. Different cultures talk about them in different ways. Some people call the moment of inspiration. Some people refer to it as beauty. Some people refer to it as poetry. Some people refer to it as feeling alive. There's so many different ways to kind of try to define it, but all of these words are attempting to define the point in time in the present moment when your mind is making different connections between different concepts, different events or experiences, And at that point, you kind of have this climactic moment where everything just kind of starts to click or make sense, and you feel a rush of emotion, and you feel positive, this surge of energy and kind of passion and respect for the beauty of the universe or the beauty of the world. That's the moment I'm attempting to describe. I think that's the moment that I fell in love with when, I discovered literature or art. I actually also want to read a quick quote that I think also summarizes or expresses the same moment in time a lot better than I've been doing. It's from a book called Wabi Sabi for Artists, Designers, Poets, and Philosophers. And they refer to beauty as a dynamic event that occurs between you and something else. Beauty can spontaneously occur at any moment given the proper circumstances, context, or point of view. Beauty is thus an altered state of consciousness, an extraordinary moment of poetry and grace. So that's kind of what I'm trying to describe. And the reason I'm spending so much time trying to kind of pinpoint this is because that moment in life is what I believe is the Holy Grail point in existence that primes people for connection with others. That's the point in your life when you're most susceptible and most desiring of a real-time, true connection with another person. Because if you think about it, it always comes down to people. Whether you're alone when you're struck with this moment of inspiration, let's say you're walking down a street in a city and you're absorbing a lot of different sensory stimuli, you're thinking about a lot of different things, maybe you're listening to a podcast, maybe you're listening to music, and you're struck with this moment of being overwhelmed by kind of your mind connecting the dots, and you feel this rush of emotion and inspiration. That's the moment that you most want to share it with somebody. You're overwhelmed with beauty and you want to talk about it with somebody. You're at the peak of a mountain and you want to nudge someone next to you and say, are you seeing what I'm seeing? When your mind is in this peak state of inspiration, that's also when you're at the height of your most social. You're the most impulsive, you're the most willing to kind of lower the barriers of social interactions. Like you might not be held back by kind of the rational part of your brain or the anxious part of your brain. You're kind of flying high, and that allows you to kind of lower your inhibitions and want to talk to people in ways that you might not otherwise want to. Now fast forward to when I started my YouTube channel. My dad was actually the first one to suggest that I start my own YouTube channel because he saw how kind of sad and lonely I had become after moving back home, because I went from having this vibrant, thriving social life in college to pretty much just only having my German Shepherd Rambo to hang out with. So I started my YouTube channel. At first it was very weird. Doing this is something that initially feels very unnatural because you right now are taking on the form of a camera. Nothing about that feels organic or connected. But before long, something magical happened. I started to get comments from you. Comments that talked about how happy you were that you discovered my channel. Comments talking about the fact that whatever nuanced observations I thought were inspiring enough to share with you guys strongly resonated with you, or that you related to, or that you thought you were the only one who thought about that, or whatever it might be. These comments were very, very similar to the moment that I was trying to describe to you at the beginning of this video, where I would read something in a story and just be overwhelmed by how strongly I connected with it. I saw that same excitement and energy from you guys, and that was everything to me. Like, that filled me with such a hunger to continue and to keep going, because here I was thinking, like, this medium is actually allowing me to do what I've pretty much wanted my whole young adult life to do, if that makes any sense. Like, Here I was inspiring people and connecting with people, and that meant everything to me. We were building this little community, this beautiful community of people that were brought together by the little things in life that made us happy, that made us feel like living was worthwhile. That was incredible to me. Problem is, it didn't take long for me to learn the pitfalls of YouTube or where it fell short. Social media 1.0 had this incredible promise of human connection. The dominant social platforms that we can't pull our eyes away from today promise to connect us to the world around us. They promise to connect us to people who are a world away. And in a way they did, but over time, rather than be optimized for human connection, they became optimized for content consumption. So everything became about not truly fueling a meaningful connection between people. It became more about just fixating you to a screen and consuming as much content as you can. Part of this is good because I talked a lot in the beginning of this video about how content has the power to really inspire somebody and to fill their mind with ideas and to get them to that climactic moment where they feel just overwhelmed with ideas and emotions and a desire to share and to talk about it. Where social media falls short is that last part of what I just said. You're consuming content that inspires you and triggers a lot of points for discussion, but it doesn't actually allow you to talk to another person about it in a human way. You're inspired, you have all these things that you want to talk about, you have all these things kind of firing away in your brain, but you don't have an outlet for actually connecting with a real person over it. And so it comes as no surprise that we're at our most isolated and we're at our most lonely, because just for hours on end, we're stimulating ourselves with no way to kind of release that energy and to use that energy to actually lead us to a meaningful human connection. As an example, I would get a lot of messages from you guys telling me how my videos really inspired you and filled you with ideas and really inspired you to live your life in pursuit of those moments of beauty that really struck you or made you feel happy to be alive. But when you closed out of the browser, you still went back to feeling isolated and lonely because you didn't have a way to actually connect with the people in your own life. For some of you, you would say that you connected very deeply with me, but you couldn't hang out with me in real life. You couldn't have a conversation with me in the moments when you wanted it the most. And so this was a theme that I started to pick up on, where a lot of you would say that you just feel very kind of brought down by the lack of a way to actually seek out meaningful conversations and connections with people in your own life. All of this signaled to me that something was wrong and that something was missing, but it didn't fully hit me until I moved to New York City. When I moved to New York City to take a job at a tech startup, I was the loneliest that I had ever been, which is pretty ironic considering the fact that on paper I had about 5,000 friends around the world. But the city itself was thriving, bustling, stimulating, and exciting, so on a lot of occasions I would actually find myself accessing that state of mind that I talked about in the beginning of this video, that inspired state of mind that really wanted me to share what I was experiencing with somebody else. And so because I was experiencing those moments of inspiration and that desire for connection so much more than ever, it actually backfired and made me feel all the more lonely because I didn't have a soul to share it with. On the other hand, I did have you guys, and I did have a YouTube channel. I could theoretically record those moments of inspiration and output them to YouTube to hear what you guys had to say about it. But I couldn't though, because I was working long hours, so a lot of the times that I was struck with those moments of inspiration, the environment or the circumstances weren't actually conducive for filming a video. So I would have to file away that inspiration, set aside time, days, sometimes weeks later to re-perform it in front of the camera when all of the stars align and the circumstances were good for filming, go through the editing process, and finally output that content to YouTube to get that response from you guys, oftentimes weeks after the moment when I needed it the most. All this made me realize that no matter how strongly you connect to content, at the end of the day, you're still alone when you watch it. And on the flip side of that, no matter how strongly you connect with the audience for your content, you're still alone when you create it. So it kind of reminds me of this quote by Yoko Ono where she said that a dream you dream alone is just a dream. A dream you dream together is reality. At the same time as this was happening, I mentioned that I was working for a tech company. Working for a tech company at the time opened my eyes to the fact that technology could be leveraged to solve this problem. We can order our food on demand. We do everything on demand. We're just used to that. So why hasn't our social life caught up? Why is it so difficult for us to find the people that we really connect with? You should be able to go from consuming content that inspires you and fills your mind up with ideas, or absorbing the world around you and having that put you in an inspired state of mind, to actively sharing that with someone in a human conversation, to actively connecting with somebody over it in real time. Why doesn't that exist? And so that was what I basically set out to create. Together with my two co-founders, we set out to create the startup that we thought had to exist. And we're working really hard, and we've been working really hard to try to make it as easy as possible for people to connect at the height of their inspired state of minds, to make it really easy for people to find people with whom to connect in the moments when they need it the most. So my battery's about to die, but that was part one, and stay tuned for part two of this video in order to hear more about the entrepreneurial journey and the startup that we're building. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will talk to you soon. Bye!